So I just saw Hereditary, and it was pretty good. This is the first feature film from Ari Aster, and a very impressive debut indeed. First of all, the movie is very well shot. Not only does it look great aesthetically, but there's lots of neat little clues and details hidden within the frame as well. Not even just within the frame, but sometimes the framing itself. This movie does a pretty fantastic job at planting subtle seeds for things to come into play later. And that's not to say that everything was unexpected, but this film certainly does it better than most. Anyone who's already watched the film can even revisit the trailer and notice things that will make them go, oh yeah. It's a very cool and interesting movie, and it feels like everything they present has some sort of purpose to it. And that's mostly what this movie was to me, was interesting. I just didn't find it particularly scary, and quite honestly, if you're looking for more of a traditional style of horror movie, this isn't really it. Personally, I would say that this film functions better as a drama than a horror movie, which is by no means an insult to it in any way. I just felt it was much more interesting and dramatic than it was actually scary, especially considering how many scenes were geared towards Toni Collette's character, and she did a pretty fantastic job with her performance. There are tons of scenes in this movie where she's really able to show off her skills as an actor. There are incredibly dramatic moments and scenes that she brings a lot to with her performance. Much of this film feels even more like a character study than a horror movie. And again, that's not an insult, and I really wish that other horror movies would even give a shit about their characters. I just didn't find it all that scary, especially during the middle chunk of the film. There was a good 20 minutes of the movie where I was relatively uninvested even. Let's just say that the movie turns into what we could call a paranormal horror cliche, and although it was done much better than the many other films that have done these exact same kind of scenes, it still wasn't really enough to make me at all impacted by what I was seeing. I do still appreciate that it manages to do this without treating the audience as though they're stupid, but the whole sequence just felt like I wasn't really watching anything at all. By the end of the day, it's obvious that this whole section was absolutely necessary for the film's plot. I'm struggling to think of how it could have been presented to make me more involved, but it might just come down to being a personal preference kind of thing. There are a lot of movies that have done those kind of scenes in that kind of way, and I have never felt entertained in the slightest. Now, although Toni Collette's performance was pretty fantastic, I unfortunately cannot say the same thing for Alex Wolff, because he legitimately dragged down the film at parts. He had no issue performing when it came to him being frightened, but when he tried to act sad, hoo boy. The way he cries in this film sounds like he's mocking someone else crying. Seriously, if that's the best take they got out of him, that's just fucking embarrassing. There are several points in the film where I wanted so much more out of his performance, but unfortunately he did not deliver. And it also didn't help that his character felt so poorly defined and inconsistent, meaning that there was so little developed about him that his character often felt contradictory in ways. There are parts of the film where I wasn't sure if it was trying to imply that he had some sort of learning disability. There are scenes where he seems like a typical stoner asshole teenager, and other scenes that make me wonder if his character was supposed to be 10 years old. I don't know, when he starts saying things like mommy, it just seems a little odd to me, especially when so much of the film builds him up as this apathetic, I don't like my parents kind of guy. Perhaps if his character were more fleshed out, then this wouldn't be an issue. If he were just written a little differently and performed by a better actor, then I wouldn't really have many issues with this character. I honestly can't really complain about anyone else's performance in the movie. Not even the little girl did a bad job. Just this one guy. Now, like I said, the movie looks great visually, but even in that department, I have some issues. There's a really great dinner table scene that's just packed with emotion, but unfortunately, one of the shots that they keep cutting back to is just terribly out of focus, to the point where I feel like it definitely should have been reshot. And yeah, I get that it's low budget, but it did affect my experience, you know? It wasn't just distracting, it was preventing me from seeing the full expression on the character's face. And it didn't really seem like it was an intentional choice in any way. I can already think of symbolic excuses that I could stretch to fit why they would do that, but either way, it just looks like an unintentional mistake. Also, the computer-generated effects in this movie were not that great. There's computer-generated ants, there's computer-generated flies, and there's computer-generated maggots, and none of them look very convincing at all, especially the flies. I was basically just watching the actors swat away at nothing, while some shitty preset-looking fly overlay covered the screen. I tried my best to believe that there were flies in that room, but it was pretty fucking impossible. The music in the film was well done for the most part. But there are several points in the movie where it sounded like there was a rave going on in the basement or something. Part of me thought it might have been the adjacent theater screen playing a club scene of another movie, but it seemed to match up pretty consistently with the film, as though these quick, low bass beats are a part of the film's atmospheric tension. I guess I'll find out whether or not that was actually a thing on my second watch. It was a little weird. There are a few things in the movie that didn't really make sense logistically, but I guess I'm willing to kind of forgive them because of what kind of movie it is. Also, the ending did kind of feel a little sloppy. I mean, I like what wound up happening, but I wish that it was explained in a different way, kind of. Overall, I really enjoyed this movie's subtlety, even if the ending wasn't really subtle. But there's one part of the movie that I feel was particularly skipped over, and I really wanted more out of it. I wanted to see and understand the consequences to the actions that I had just witnessed, but it kind of skipped over most of it. Anyway, this movie was pretty great overall, even though I do have some issues with it. Toni Collette and her character make this movie very worthwhile. The cinematography and the presentation of the story make it even better. This is one of the better horror movies out there, and I'll be seeing this one again. Try your best to catch a show earlier in the day so there aren't as many obnoxious people around. And I'm giving this one a 7 out of 10.